Nolvus Awakening is by far one of the best mod collections available for Skyrim at the moment. And frankly, this is nothing new. This collection has been regarded as one of the best for quite some time now. It definitely has some very strong contenders for the top one position. The first one that comes to mind is Lorem, which I also adore. But really, it's going to end up coming down to personal preference and whether or not this list or other lists have specific mods that you really like. It's also going to come down to timing because these lists, they're constantly evolving and changing. They're constantly having new mods added or removed based on updates for other mods that might tie into them or a general direction or philosophy that the author wanted to change. So let's talk about Novus in its most current state, and then you can decide if the list is for you or not. Alright, so the first thing that I really like about this collection is how stable it is for the amount of mods. That doesn't mean that you're never going to run into any issues whatsoever, but for the amount of mods that it has, which I think is sitting over 3,500 now, it is insanely stable. Even something like bugs, it was super rare for me to come across any bugs, and the few ones that I did, I usually found out that they weren't really bugs. It's stuff that I changed on the MCM and pressed the wrong thing, changed the control, and didn't realize. So it wasn't a bug, I just messed it up and was able to fix it. The only recurring bug that Nova seems to have is this occasional bug where if you keep loading into the same save, which again you're not supposed to do, but it might happen regardless, is an issue with the camera. You might come across this problem where the camera suddenly is not focused on your character and you can't seem to play and the screen is kind of dark. So all you have to do is type in the console command player move to player, and it fixes it instantly every time, never an issue. That is the only issue that I came across throughout the entirety of both of my playthroughs, and that is a very well-known issue. I think they're working on it. It's technically in beta. They're aware of it. The only other quote-unquote issues that I had with the list weren't during the playthrough. They were actually during the installation, and also those are pretty well known and they have pretty easy fixes also. I'm going to be linking to you guys in the description of this video the installation guide that I used, and I didn't really have any issues but one. And the one issue that I did have, they mentioned how to fix it in the video, and that's another thing to say, maybe point number 2 that a lot of people bring up why they like this list. It's actually pretty darn easy to install. Yes, it is a massive list, so it does take quite some time, and yes, you do need Nexus Premium just like every other list, right? But it's really easy. I think Novus has to be the most plug-and-play friendly list that I've ever used for Skyrim. It's like really easy to do. So what else? Well, number 3, let's just jump straight into it. My favorite part about this mod collection, aside from the graphics, which you can probably just tell they're amazing, it's the combat. The combat is really good. I've seen all the mods that it's using for combat individually at some point playing Skyrim. I've seen all of these, but together, the dodge, the parry, and the way everything works, it's so fluid. It's the most fun I've ever had with the combat in this game. You have that slow motion finishing off of enemies that just looks absolutely badass. You have the roll, which looks super fluid. The roll and the dodge in Novus feels more fluid than it does in Dark Souls. I don't know how, but it does. You have the parry mechanic, which is my absolute favorite because I usually don't like to play with shields. So it's really cool to be able to parry with a dagger and stuff like that. It really changes the dynamic of how you can play. I love it. Not to mention the absolute plethora of new skills that have been added to the game. Like your skill tree now looks insane. You can make your character however you want and there's so many options. There's also so many new spells which made it very hard for me to play as a two-handed character in this game because I really usually like to play one-handed with illusion spells and stuff like that. And at first, that is exactly what I did. But as soon as I made or picked up my first two-handed weapon in this game, my god, the two-handed combat is so fluid, it looks so cool. I haven't seen the game play this well before. Usually my issue with two-handed weapons is that they look cool and it's kind of my preference, but they play really clunky in Skyrim. And even in other collections, they still feel they feel really slow and clunky and not fun to play. So as a result, I ended up starting my entire game over and I made a two-handed Nord warrior type of character. And my god, if you can do yourself one thing in this game, if you do this only once, Get yourself a fire sword, man. God damn, it looks so badass. And then you add the lighting and the shaders that the game uses, which we'll talk about the graphics soon, but you're just pulling out this sword that's catching on fire in the middle of the night, and you add these slow-mo finishing moves that just look so cool, man. I don't think I've ever had so much fun with the combat. And frankly, two-handed combat gets a little repetitive, but the mechanics of how it works are so dynamic and fun that I really never got bored of it. I guess usually the issue that I have with making a character like this is I find it a little bit repetitive, not being able to use magic, which he can use some magic, but, not having a focus on that, it's kind of limiting. You're just whacking stuff with a big stick. But because the dodge and the parrying mechanic, all of that just works so well, I never got tired of it, and I freaking love this character. So since I just went ahead and mentioned it already, let's go ahead and talk about the graphics, which I don't think you need me to point out that the graphics look amazing, but we'll talk about it a little bit. The first thing I'm going to say is don't be instantly intimidated by the way that the game looks, because I'm using the ultra present, like the max resolution and graphics that you can, and it does have several others, so you don't have to make the game look this nice if your computer can't handle it or whatever. You can choose how graphically intensive you want the game to look. You can change the difficulty settings of the game. If it looks too hard to you, you don't have to play it that way. I'm playing on Prepare to Die on this one, so I am playing on the higher difficulty, which we'll talk about that and my opinion on the game's balance in just a minute. But graphically, just know that if you think your computer can't handle it, maybe give it a shot with one of the lower spec options because they're available. Also, for my graphics on this playthrough, I am using Cabbage, which you don't have to use. There are different other graphic styles, or are they called EMBs? I don't know what they're called, but you don't have to play with this one if you're not the biggest fan of the way it looks. I gotta say that when I first came into it, I was not the biggest fan. It took me a little bit of getting used to the way this game looks. I don't know exactly what it was, maybe because I'm just coming off of another Modlist that maybe looks a little bit shinier on the graphics side, but I actually had a hard time getting used to the shading and lighting of the collection. There are times where it just looks a little bit dark, like it's not that it looks bad at any point, it actually looks very natural and realistic, but it's almost like the shading causes everything to blend together and it makes it hard sometimes on the combat. It makes it hard to see, but I got used to it. It just took a little bit. Especially when it comes nighttime and you're using spells or you have some sort of enchantment on your sword, it looks really cool with the lighting and the shading. I don't think I can go back now. Speaking of busy on the ice, that is one criticism that I do have for Nolvus. It's a really busy mod, like literally, not just on the ice. There are some locations, especially the inn in Whiterun, that my god, there's so many people crammed into this place, you literally can't move. It's really obnoxious. I also found that a lot of times NPCs are right in front of the door just standing and you can't seem to enter or leave locations. At times that did happen and it was kind of annoying. Moving on from that, let's just really quick talk about the difficulty, because I felt like 99% of the time, Nolvus strikes a perfect balance between difficult yet not frustrating. I only had one place that I felt that was unbalanced and kind of stupid, which was Bleak Falls Barrow, which again, it's not exclusive to Nolvus because I feel the same way with Lorem when it comes to that place. But I'll show you in just a minute here what I mean, and you can probably see it from the gameplay that I'm showing. Most of the time, the combat was absolutely perfect. Really, the only frustration that I had with the game when it comes to the difficulty specifically was in Bleak Falls Barrow when you're facing those Nordic skeletons or whatever they're called. You know what I'm talking about. I found myself dying over and over the exact same way in this location, which is basically 2 or 3 of these guys are just sniping you from across the room with their shout, and it's going through like a wall. It just... I don't know. Maybe it's a skill issue. I'm sure somebody's just going to say in the comments, you're bad, that's the problem. Whatever. I didn't have a problem with the entire game other than this one location. It seems to be a trend in some of these lists to make Bleak Falls Barrow particularly difficult, which is fine. It's usually pretty fun. I didn't have a problem with the entire dungeon. I thought it was cool. This was the one thing that annoyed me, and honestly, the only thing that annoyed me in my entire playthrough. The only thing about the mod, when it comes to the combat and the balancing, that bothered me. Everything else was perfect. And really, like I said, I kind of did this to myself by putting it on the hardest difficulty, and also I didn't hire like a partner or a companion, right? I could have done that, but I didn't. Also, I didn't exactly, quote unquote, respect the dungeon. I don't know how else to put it, but it's kind of general knowledge in some of these mod lists that Bleak Falls Barrow is going to be very hard. A lot of these dungeons are notoriously difficult. Not only should you not be doing this quest if you're under leveled or depending on your build, but really you gotta respect the dungeon, which I did not do. Like, you gotta actually bring items and prepare yourself for it. That is actually quite cool. I actually like that idea, right? When you go to a dungeon, you kind of gotta bring potions, you gotta bring scrolls, and you kind of gotta think your way through it. You can't just show up and expect to clear it on the first go. So because I didn't do that, a couple times I ended up needing to exit the dungeon, buy items, and then come back, which kind of breaks the flow of things. But again, is that really Novus's fault, or is that like skill issue, right? Probably a little bit of both. I don't think the skeletons sniping you across the map with the frickin' shouts is like essential to making Bleak Falls Barrow a better experience. Like, my criticism when it comes to that remains. However, you should prepare yourself better than I did. So what other criticisms do I have for Novus? I'm trying to think, are there any other things that I didn't like? There's one that comes to mind, and that is literally it. The only other thing that I kind of felt was lacking was cooking stations, which to a lot of people it's like, what? Why is that even important? Well, to me it is. I like to play survival, and a lot of the time I felt like there were no cooking stations. Different places and inns where I expected that to be there, they just weren't, and I had a hard time finding them, which is a pretty weird complaint, but that did happen. Now granted, the innkeeper does offer you full meals, so you don't really even need to hunt in this game if you don't want to. You don't have to cook if you don't want to. You just can get your full meal, which is, fulfills the hunger and thirst requirement for 20 gold. You can just do that if you want, but I don't like playing the game that way. I like the whole hunting, having to cook, having to buy salt. So not having the cooking stations everywhere, that seems like such a dumb pet peeve that's so personal to me. I don't know if anybody else had a problem with that, but that was a problem I had, okay? And that is literally the end of my complaints. There is nothing else that I can think of that I didn't like about the list. And again, it's in beta, so maybe they'll change some of those things. Let's just be real here for a second. If all your complaints for the entire list that has over 3,500 mods, all your complaints boil down to there's not enough cooking stations and I got annoyed with the skeleton knights, I think that's a pretty good bar to set there, right? That's a pretty good list if those are the only two things that annoyed me. Oh, and at times the screen is a little busy. Like, come on, those are some pretty minor details. Everything else that I have is praise. It's quite amazing of a mod list. Weapons and armor, there's just a ton. I don't even know how many there are, but it never felt like there wasn't enough. Are some of those armors kind of like, I don't know. I don't even want to use the word gratuitous. Do they feel like maybe they don't belong? Maybe, but so what? Just don't use them. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the weapons that I saw or a lot of the armors, I don't know. It was cool to have the option. Would I use them? Probably not. Do they need to be there? For me, probably not, but maybe somebody else likes them. So I just like the fact that there's a lot of options to make your character look like whatever you want him to look. A lot of weapon and armor options, a lot of spell options. There's just a lot of ways to play the game. Also, if you haven't noticed this already, I feel like I'm a little bit all over the place going back and forth, but I guess back to the combat. I don't know if you noticed, but the enemies are unleveled or level capped or whatever you call it. I don't remember the name of the mod that it's using. I think it's unleveled Skyrim. Well, whatever it is, the enemies are not leveling up with you. So that changes the way that you play the game. There are certain quests that you can't do if you're not up to the level of the enemies quite yet, which is the same thing with Lorem and other mod lists. So for me, I love that. Not only am I used to that, it's how I kind of expect to play the game now. But if you don't like that, then maybe playing the game like this is not for you. Oh, and one more thing to mention about the combat, which I feel kind of bad that I'm only bringing this up towards the end of the video because it is one of the coolest mods on the list, is Shadow of Skyrim. Man, that is one of my favorite mods that they have here. Shadow of Skyrim is essentially a alternate death mod. If you've never played it, it uses the Nemesis system, the same one from, what is it, Shadow of Mordor, whatever that game is called. If you've never played it, it's a very cool alternate death, Nemesis arch enemy making, story creating type of mod. Essentially what it does is when you die, you can choose what happens. And one of the unique features that it has compared to something like alternate death is that whole Nemesis system, which what that does is when an enemy kills you, there is a chance that they become your nemesis and they turn into like a sort of mini boss, and they can actually steal your weapon and it becomes theirs. So now this random mercenary or bandit that killed you now is like a mini boss in the game, and he's actually hunting you and you can hunt him throughout the game. And if you kill him, you get a buff. If he kills you, you might get a debuff. It just creates like a very, almost like a side thing going on. The only other thing that I can compare it to, other than Shadow of Mordor or whatever that game is called, is something like Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I don't know if anybody here has played that game because, Assassin's Creed's not all that popular, but that game has a really cool system where you have mercenaries hunting you constantly, and you can hunt them while they hunt you. It's very similar to that, and it makes the game feel more alive, because a lot of times with these games, especially Bethesda games, you do feel like you're kind of just going from point A to point B, completing quest A, completing quest C or D or whatever, and you're kind of just doing fetch quests and stuff like that. This, along with other mods, kind of helps add to that, not only immersion, but it makes the game feel more dynamic. Like there's more going on and the world feels more alive than just you doing specific quests. I don't know, I just think it's cool that at any point when you're playing the game, some random bandit or Stormcloak soldier or whatever can kill you, and they can become now a new mini-boss. And once you kill them, later in the game, something else might kill you, and now that's another boss that you gotta hunt and be careful with getting hunted by. I thought that was really cool. And I think this is where the video starts devolving into getting really into the nuances of what each mod does. And it's like 3,500. I can't do that, but I just felt like, I guess in a general sense, Nolvus is really, really customizable, which is not exactly common for most of the lists that I have played. It uses one of my favorite mods, which is Trade and Barter, so you can customize the economy of the entire game to your liking. I love that mod. It uses trade routes. There's so many little different mods that it uses that allow you to customize the experience, and it really makes it feel like a sandbox. You can totally give yourself completely different experiences just tweaking things on the MCM on each playthrough. So I found that very cool. Since the dashboard of the game all the way to once you're in the game using the MCM, it's uber customizable, which I really liked and appreciated. I don't really know what else to say. I could stay here for an hour and just list off every single mod, but it adds a lot of those mods, if not all of them, that add these whole new locations to the game, like Bruma and whatnot, and these mods that have entire other areas and locations within them. So it adds a lot of quests. It makes your game a lot more robust. There's just so much more to do. Also, the other thing I'll mention, some of the animations that you see, they might look really flashy. I forgot to mention this throughout the video. I guess the game kind of looks very fantasy-esque, right? You're seeing a lot of these animations. They're very flashy. You can change that, by the way. You don't have to play with the same animations that I'm playing. When you install the list, you can choose between the fantasy mode, which is this more flashy combat MMO-esque type of look or feel, or you can do the classic where it looks a little bit more grounded. So if that was something that was turning you off from the list, just know that, like, again, everything is super customizable. Graphic fidelity is insane. Also animations on third person, easy install. Oh, one thing I didn't mention also that is a very common question that comes up. Yes, you can play this game in first person. I don't know if throughout the video I showed footage of first person gameplay. I don't play in first person, but yes, you can play first person also. I don't think it's as good, but it works. If you stuck with me till the very end here, as always, I thank you very much for your time. If you did in fact enjoy this video, please don't forget to hit it with a thumbs up because it does help me a lot. And if you want to see more videos like these in the future, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks again.